like to introduce Stefan
Maneva.
for how designing with all five senses drives diversity and inclusivity in fashion.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, John, I appreciate it. I don't know if I need this. So we heard from Nia just a little bit earlier, and she talked a lot about the design process, how you have the design thinking. I leveraged that methodology as well. What we're going to be doing this afternoon is something a little bit. Having said that, I'm going to give an introduction to about who I am. So this is how I describe myself. So I'm a design hybrid. I'm not a pure designer. My actual undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering. So I made the transition shortly thereafter, and I've had the opportunity to work in large corporate situations the last 20 years, both at IBM, having different positions, and then for a large software company where we focused on the, again, consulting, but supporting for multiple industries, including fashion, apparel, soft goods, and hard goods, the entire process of product development. What's the tools and software that you would use to support that? So some of the things that you covered during the unified development and sourcing that is required to support the fashion process today. We support, the company that I work with for many years supports that with tools and processes. So there's like a platform. So a little bit going further back to give you kind of my background, because I consider myself a third culture kid. Those that are familiar with that term, third culture kid, somebody that has parents of two different cultures. So there was this, again, a hybrid, hence my description. It's not only applied to the way I was educated, but also the way that I am and the way that I think. So I was born in San Francisco in the Bay Area, but I left when I was very young, and I grew up here. Anybody know where this is? Athens. Yeah, so I spent 15 years of my life growing up, or a little less than that, until I finished high school in Greece. Went to school in England, graduated, moved back to the United States, and the last 18 years I've been living here in New York. So kind of, as I mentioned before, the connection to fashion and the overlap between mine and how it drives diversity and inclusivity from my time working for Dassault Systems, a software company that developed, like I said earlier, the software to support the entire product development process for multiple different industries, 12 different industries, and one of them includes fashion apparel, which I managed the global consulting team for a number of years. So what you see here is sort of like a summary of all the touch points. You talked about how do you manage the consumer-centric sort of vision, and how do you make sure that you sustain the brand promise, during that. So again, how do you do that for not only your product development process, for the collection and every collection that you put out, but also what it's like across the entire channel, all your channels. So the omni-channel experience, is it the same, and how do you manage that? So I drove the software consult practice that developed all of our clients. So without getting into too much about me, just want to get right into what we're going to be talking about today. So again, a little challenging in that it's a different way of looking at it, and hopefully it will get you to think, and that's the whole point. Designers typically are very comfortable in being uncomfortable. I think you mentioned it a little bit as well. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Traditionally, our clients don't like that, right? Because it's out of the comfort zone. They feel like they can't control the situation, but that's where sparks of innovation, creativity often come from. And that's where, that's the thesis behind what I'm going to do today. So it's sort of like a workshop, but in the time that we have, I can't really get into all the details that I would do normally. But I'm going to take you through sort of a introduction for those that were here for the previous presentation, there's a little overlap in terms of some of the trends that you'll see, but I'm not going to go into too much of that. It's just sort of to set the scene and get people thinking of what we're going to be talking about. For us, it's about today's workshop is about thinking about the 5 senses and how those 5 senses help you design new product, or together with the use of technology can come up with something new for our consumer, right? But you know, where we are, we're here during we're in New York during Fashion Week, so you can imagine this is where it's all happening right now. So we're at the crossroads of the world, so not too far away from Times Square, where every year we have a tremendous amount is a completely new, things are changing. Again, Nia, you just to the rest of your previous talk, you talked a lot about sort of changes and how the supply chain is affecting us. I mean, look at what we're dealing with in terms of tariffs, right? I just, without getting into all the details, again, we have a new set of values. The new generation, I call the Generation I, or Gen I, which is the first generation to be completely aware of an item, which is something that's connected to the internet, and available all the time. They have a completely different set of values. They want to make sure the brands that they are supporting and buying and they're spending money on share their values. They're willing to sacrifice, and they're not willing to sort of give in, and they want it all, right? So we're talking about mass customization, talking about personalization. It's not good enough just, again, you mentioned this earlier, it's not good enough just to have a handbag that Louis Vuitton comes out with. I want to make sure that the handbag that I have, nobody else has, right? It's mine, and it's only mine. So how do you customize it? You know, and then how are you getting that connection? How are you getting the word out to your clients? You have social media, you have the sort of evolution. So if we dive deeper a little bit into it, you know, if we go further back, it's sort of about technology led. In the 80s to the aughts, it was about sort of market led. So marketing budgets had power, and now it's social. If you have the right social tools and the social presence, or if you're an influencer, you have a lot of power. And that's where we are today, right? So I'm putting these things out there, not because you don't know them already, but just to set this so that you be thinking about some of these things when I tie it back to the senses that I want you to kind of think of. Right? So here's a eye chart really, but the point I'm trying to make here is that these are the core technologies that we see are coming about. So again, whether you see, if you're trying to connect smart clothing to actually do something useful, it needs to have probably some sort of 5G connection. And you connect to a 5G device, so your phone or something else, or Wi-Fi. And how do you do that? Probably Bluetooth, maybe Wi-Fi. There's a couple of technologies that allows you, that are small enough for it, that's low power, doesn't need a huge battery to connect that. We see some examples over here from the types of sort of connected smart clothing that are real typical of what we're looking to sort of see how it's going to be evolving. You see some of the other things that we're talking about is the Internet of Things. It's going to be for how to connect all the things that we want to make sort of interactions around that are going to really drive the value. Just because I can put a Bluetooth connection on a piece of clothing, I mean, I should. What is the use case behind that, right? And that's really what really matters, nothing else. So if I looked at it, put it more visually, for those that are more designers, here's an example of summarizing sort of the similar sort of ideas, but more visually. So you see, sustainability is a topic, DIY is a sort of a trend. Internet is obviously, we talked about design, the sharing economy, right? Co-branding, we see a lot more collaborations between two very well-known brands, or a well-known brand and a super high-end designer, right? Or an architect, somebody in a sort of discipline where you see these cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary collaborations that take place that end up having a cumulative effect on the power, the resulting product that goes flies off the shelf before they can make enough of them, right? We always see that. So if we dived into a couple of things that I think are important, one of the important things is sort of the evolution of smart materials. This is very key because again, I'm seeing a tremendous amount of examples where you see companies like a startup called Squee Inc. Or Bot Factory. They basically create 3D printer. It's a printer that can print directly on cloth material. So you can create a circuit on your T-shirt for all purposes, and it's washable. We have to take some things off, like the battery. You're not gonna put that on, right? But they're still a startup, but they're making great strides in being able to use these new materials to print actual circuit boards, not just let's say conductive particles on the textiles, but actual circuit boards directly on the clothes. So you can imagine where the evolution is going in the next couple of years. Self-cleaning capability, that's tremendous. We're talking about sustainability. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but if the Queen of Raw was here, she could probably drop them all. The idea is people would complain about how much water is being used to create a certain pair of jeans. Well, it's not that. The problem is how many times you have to wash it during the life of the pair of jeans that you own. So if you can create a product that doesn't need to be cleaned, that's the real savings in the water usage, right? So without going into all of these things, I want you to kind of look at these and make a mental note, because these are the technologies that will be able to help us solve some of the problems. If we were to think about the designing with focusing on a particular sense, right? So I'll kind of give you that sort of a little bit of a hint here as to what we want to talk. Another example of different use cases that you see for wearables are here. So it kind of gives it a great summary of the types of things that you're seeing for different parts of the anatomy. So obviously smart gloves, you see those already. Heads-up displays, so with augmented reality, and as the footprint of this gosh awful clunky thing that you used to put on your head becomes smaller, the use cases for using those more ubiquitously goes up, right? So the use cases then start to become much more interesting. So obviously you have a number of other areas with smart clothing that's really coming across. There's a couple seats here. There's seats in the back if you want to grab a seat, make yourself comfortable. I don't bite. So again, think of it this way, just to kind of give a segue into what we're talking about. If you didn't have access, if you couldn't use hands and legs, right? What technologies could you use to sort of help you design something that could help you or the person that has that disability make something be able to be memorable, or to have an experience that's much more than what they would have today. And then how would that translate to the mass audience that could be potentially translated to something that really is useful for everybody, right? These are the things that we're talking about. Now, one other that I wanted to talk about is we are what we call about the experience economy. So it's all about selling or buying experience. It was mentioned again before that there's not a need necessarily. People are going away from buying stuff and owning stuff to sharing it, or just using it on demand as they need. So full disclosure, I do own a car now because I have a little kid, a 3-year-old. But for the first 12 years I was here in New York, I didn't have a car. I came from the San Francisco Bay Area. Everybody has a car. California, everybody drives. But I came here and it would just sit in the garage. I would use it maybe once a week. So I sold my car. I used car sharing programs. I used both of them. Although the two main ones, Zipcar and Hertz, like Connect by Hertz. And they were both within one of them. One of the services was in the building that I lived in. So it was tremendous. Didn't have to pay for parking, didn't have to pay for insurance, didn't have to pay for anything. And I would literally go down. It was easier to get the car shared than it is today because my parking garage is like blocks away. So anyway, that's the New York experience. But we're talking about the experience economy. So it's all about experience and how can you, as a brand, create the best experience that will of your brand, promote it, ensure that you'll have repeat customers coming back again and again, right? And again, a little bit about sort of the direct action to what's the next way we're going to be designing. Since it is the experience, since it is about the new generation where they are conscious of the environment they live in, and it's not just about making money anymore. They want to make sure that they are enjoying life. It is connecting to what's really important to them. Excuse me. So you can see some of the underlying items we need to be conscious of when we're designing products for these new generations. So, as I continue with the introduction, to summarize, today everything's smart. Smart fridges, smart cars, buildings, smart clothes, smart glasses. I was just at an event the other day. A designer from Marchand, I don't know if you're familiar with the eyewear. Excuse me. She had a new pair of glasses that was connected to her phone. So I had a whole other case, a whole set of use cases that people can do.
What do they do? They see for you.
Well, it actually focuses more on the sort of your inner health as opposed to having a screen like the Google Glass. So.
Oh, it's a feedback.
Yeah. Now, so thinking of the sort of trends at a high level, what I want to introduce you now is sort of this exercise that we're going through. So I put a picture of this building. Does anybody know what this is? Those designers should be able to recognize it. It is Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. So
it's up on
92nd, 91st and 92nd. So the reason I put this up here is because I've been working a lot in this sort of multi-sensorial design space, and last year they did an exhibit called Senses, Design Beyond Vision. So again, it was tremendously interesting the way everybody has their own perspective. I think they did a great job of identifying, eliminating people, pun intended, sort of the other senses and how you can completely transform the way you see something or feel it, depending on the focus of senses that you're looking at. So there's a lens that sort of changes things. And so they talk about design activates our senses. I actually turn that around. In my workshops, I talk about how senses activate design. So how taking the exercise of becoming uncomfortable a little bit, and it's not just about the senses that you go to at first, like sight and sound maybe, or touch. Try to look at things in a different light, and that really starts to kind of ask a lot of different questions in a new way, and creates opportunity for innovation and creativity. So again, these are examples that you could see if you had gone to the exhibit. I used examples to kind of highlight some of the things that I taught in my workshop. And I did a multi-sensorial workshop during New York Design Week, so last May. And that was more about how to see the city leveraging all 5 of your senses. So that was a lot of fun, and the people that attended ended up creating their own digital maps, multi-sensorial maps of the city based on their sort of more heightened sense. So keep in mind how that, so again, what would you go there? So what do you want to eat? Think about that, and then think about how to experience it. Or, what did you want to sense? What do you want to feel? So those are the ways that you can start to look at it very differently. That's an easy thing. Was more for consumers because they just wanted to experience the city, and it's easier to kind of digest and sort of experience if you're a non-designer or not in, right? So it's a lot easier to handle. Another one that I did this past June for the outdoor industry. So you mentioned the outdoor industry earlier a little bit. So I did a workshop for them, again, for the brands to sort of think about how they could come up with new products, new sort of experiences that are surrounding the product to make that outdoor experience much more enjoyable for their clients, and again, repeat customers, keep them coming back for. You want to have something that's going to sustain, go through it's not going to be fast fashion where you wear it once and throw it out. Something that's going to be able to keep, and it's going to evolve and have multiple purposes and prevent potentially activations for you to enjoy, where you can capture them and share them with others, so that other people can sort of see what you enjoyed out in the outdoors, right? So that's what we did. So here's an example of pictures that we did. So it was very, very hands-on. We don't have the space for this here, and we don't have enough time. But again, the idea here's some examples of what we kind of thought about as we were sort of coming up with these activations. So how can you recreate anybody that loves photography, for example? If you don't know Ansel Adams, he has a very famous picture of Half Dome, like with a full moon coming up right behind it. And an experience that I can vouch for personally, is I happened to be there. I was there for Centennial. I was visiting Yosemite, and I was there for Centennial when that picture was taken. So unbeknownst to me, I'm walking around and enjoying. And there's like 150 photographers set up in the valley trying to recreate the picture that he had taken 100 years ago at that time. So imagine the experience of these guys. I mean, they spent tons of money just to make sure that they can recreate for themselves the exact conditions that Adams had. So for them, he's no object. It's all about the experience, because that's not going to happen again in their lifetime. So if you can uncover what those nuggets are for your consumer, your customer, you're going to be golden. It's tremendous. Okay, so how do we do that for us? How do we do it in our case? So here's what you've got an idea of what I'm talking about. So the question is rhetorical. You may not have a great sense, but some people definitely do. My wife, for example, her sense of smell is ridiculous. She can smell amazing. So it's all about, for her, it's perfume. She loves perfume, and she needs the more complex the notes, the better. So I have a friend of mine who runs what's called the Centarium here in New York, where they do custom fragrances. Do one she actually attended my workshop as well, but I had my wife go there for her birthday, and she just had a blast. So that's what is your sort of, or what smell or what sense comes to mind? Is it taste? Are you a foodie? Is it about art? Is it about fashion, design? So whatever that is, start to think about, in the context of what I showed you before, start thinking, how could those potentially, how could that sense help activate something for a new product? What could be, if you were to tie in some sort of new technology, what could that potentially do for that? Enhancing it, your own use? Or if you can imagine somebody didn't have that sense, what could you do through technology to help that get more interesting, right? So pick one of those 5 senses and start thinking about how they can be enhanced or enabled using technology to drive. And the whole point about this is to drive inclusivity and diversity. So if somebody doesn't have the access or doesn't have the ability to understand these sort of things, how can you build that into the product? So again, I use these things to sort of point out a point I like to make. Like, are we stuck in a rut? Are we coming out with the next, every year it's a new collection? Is it iterative? Are we really transforming the fashion industry in a way that's truly going to be sustainable, socially, economically, and for the planet? Or are we just coming up with a new election? Or are we trying to make it gimmicky? I use this as an example because although I ran von Fichtenberg, I hated the fact that she used this Google glass in one of her runway shows, because it was some sort of cool item to put on your face, But I take offense to the fact that just because you can make something, doesn't mean you should. Just, why should I wake up in the morning and the first thing that I do is put this thing on my face, being this Google glass, right? What's the use? Is it going to transform my life? And if it doesn't, then I don't want to make it, because we have enough garbage out there in the world already. So, I'm just pointing out that the other thing I want to focus on is, are we aware of who our client is today, or what they're going to be tomorrow? Who's buying our stuff? You were talking about analytics before, about understanding your consumer. That's a great point of really trying to get to, we understand, we might be thinking we're selling, we're creating something for somebody, but it's bought by somebody completely different. So, who are our clients today? Understand who those are, and maybe think about who they might be in the future. Maybe think about how, by creating a product that's for the fringes, the folks that are not today buying your stuff, that might be creating larger opportunities for yourself as a brand, right? And again, we talked about it, the fact that it's all about experience. So if you could tie all those things together, the fact that the truth is that people now they buy experiences, and how do you create a memorable experience? It's going to be much more memorable if you're directly connected to a heightened sense. Okay, so can we try to imagine how activating our senses and use of this new technology can inspire and breed action for everyone? So again, think about those 5 senses. Think about which you wanted to choose. Pick one, and think about those technologies that we sort of touched on. Is it IoT? Is it some sort of Bluetooth? It's some sort of LED light that could activate or enhance or support a particular sense. What would that be created? What could you be creating? And by definition, once you create those products, how does it the use case will show you how it's sort of being inclusive, how it's helping people, how it's sort of everybody to be able to enjoy the product. I'll give you an example in the product world is the grip kitchen utensils. So you have a peeler at home, that super heavy rubbery thing. Anybody can use that, whether it's a 3-year-old kid or a 95-year-old woman, right? That's with arthritis, right? And the point is, they were designed for those edges. Everybody across the board can use them because they're designed on purpose.
Much more comfortable.
Okay, so that's sort of the idea. So I'm going to prompt you with some examples. Obviously, these are just some ideas, thoughts, and the point is that I want you to think of your own perspective and provide your own perspective to the people around you. So start thinking of these things. Again, so you'll see the images here. Even though I'm using a runway model to talk about light and how it sort of illuminates the body, how it illuminates the figure, how it accentuates the draping of the dress. That way, it's more beauty oriented or fashion oriented. However, there could be utilitarian components to that as well. So there could be, just by adding some sort of smart technology, or you make it able, if there's a proximity sensor with a particular, as we're talking about autonomous vehicles and gearing up 5G across the city, with just small sensor, if you try to cross the street, it could illuminate the dress you're wearing so that drivers that are coming across the street can see you better. You know, or if your child is on the sidewalk, it could, by adding a device that may be able to create a brief sound, alert you of the fact that the kid's trying to get the ball, you know, as it's gone up to the street. So, you know, those invisible boundaries that we have today that are very expensive, you can just, using smart technology that exists today, you can create these sort of things. We talked about smart, you know, being able to change the properties of clothes. I've talked to a couple of folks that are working on, they have metallic thread already, and that's nothing new, right? Built into clothes today. And by turning on a very low voltage current, it changed the actual properties of the garment themselves. They can become strong or durable, for example, or they can retain their shape. So that shape memory can be turned on or turned off depending. So there's a lot of different functions that can be turned into this. Now, in the case of what you see on the left, on the left is a new app that Rate's come out with that, again, helps you understand how you're going through your workout, what kind of things you might be missing, what vitamins, what minerals you need to replenish. So it's telling you, oh, maybe drink some more Gatorade. Obviously, it's centered about what they want to do, which is fine. But if it has a usage that works for you, why not, right? So again, I talked about some of the other examples, but the idea here is all of your senses can be used as a way to kind of brainstorm as to what you can come up with. So as we've been talking, what I want you to maybe turn to the person next to you and sort of share some ideas that you might have based on what we've talked about, or just chat for just a minute or two, just to sort of think about or exchange. You guys been you know, what may have interested you during the discussion we've had so far. Guys, let's turn it around. Let's wrap up and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm gonna get everybody kind of provide their feedback as to their thoughts about. So in each individual will kind of give us their thoughts. As you kind of change some ideas. Now think about, so if you were gonna create a collection, you know, there's a theme usually when designers do that. If you were to try to create that based on a particular sense, what would that look like? You know, or maybe you're incorporating multiple senses to sort of satisfy the sort of demands that the needs of the collection that you want to convey, get across. What would what would they like potentially, and how could they? Can you maybe think about highlighting how they could be drive that inclusivity of that diversity? So again, I'll give you like a few more minutes to think about that, and then I'm gonna ask everybody to provide some feedback.
Yeah. I think it would have an and then maybe just material, like have a way to print specific material under the cover print, and then when you run the print, it can work for finding photographers to is a very conventional. So I think for that, like I don't want to and then I think that looks like it smells good.
All right, guys, I'm gonna bring Buddy to kind of finish up with your thoughts, and then turn around back, and let's share with everybody some of the thoughts that you may have discussed. So I'm gonna start over here, and say your name, and then give us sort of your thoughts. What you may have discussed, what you want to brainstorm.
Hi, I'm Keely, and we talked different ways the senses can combine to shape the haptics, which is like this thing where you can create different senses with vibrations and touch. And Google, she mentioned, did this thing like where they create all of the cup sensation. And we also talked photography and smell. I think it'd be really cool to develop a print like where you can have like scratch and sniff technology in there, and you can smell the coffee when you see a photo of coffee.
Smell of it, yeah, awesome.
Scratch.
So yeah,
Okay.
she just covered both.
Okay, awesome. Okay, please tell us your name.
Sorry, my name is Hi. We talked about this like in runway. So we talked about how to make runway more interactive using all five voices, and how it would be best if our designers, who are just designing clothes, are going to have to design a whole experience to go with the clothes. Where they want the smell to be there, maybe where they want the drink to be for flavor, because they don't really think about music and about the clothes, but they need to capture.
Very nice, very nice.
You don't overload them on, but you have to also train the designers. I was telling Tara, what's your name? And Louisa, that I'm gonna have to start that. I'm gonna have to start that right at the beginning and talk to the designers how this is gonna be an experience. So it's not runway because they give me a lot of crap because it's like I want my designs to be an important thing. And how do you tell them that this is going to uplift, enhance, communicate, and better serve them as designers because it's an experience. Yeah, and because they're very egotistical at times. They kept pushing back and telling me I need distraction. And I think to myself, the audience needs that distraction. They need that integration of all those senses in order to make it, because you don't know, she's going to be in touch, she's going to be in the sight, you're going to be in smell, you're going to be in the sound. We have to have those layers in there and finding a balance so that, yes, the design is the most important thing that you're complimenting.
Absolutely.
These should be enhancements, not distractions.
There you go, when I have to say that. It's going to be an enhancement, not a distraction. They're telling me it was too distracting. Everything in the show was too distracting from their design. So how do I tell them it's not? You know, and argue to their point where, yeah, designs are so important and, you know, don't kind of step on their little fragile egos.
Well, you know, historically, what I've seen is fashion as far-reaching and forward as it is in terms of the clothes it conceived. The way the way that they interact with the actual consumer is very old school. Product designers, for example, many years they've understood this through service design. So the last 10-15 years, it's no longer a product. You don't buy a car, but you buy a car. There's all how do you interact with it. Basically, the focal point is the product, and that's what it's going to be in fashion. It's the garment or the collection.
Right.
That's the focal point. But it's what you create around it that activates it, makes it relevant, and targets the specific customer that might have different words.
And more memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. And using those senses, often you can sort of customize it. The product is the same, but you're getting a whole new experience around it that makes it unique for everybody that owns it, right?
And you're competing with other people who are doing, like you're competing with a rock concert. I'm sorry, but the runway has now become a concert with these video screens and, you know, that whole experience. And it is demanded. I mean, I want to make sure that the audience walks away with an experience that they treasure, not just, you know, buying their clothes.
Sure. I mean, imagine if they were given some sort of app or something they could download on their phone that could show them what they would look like and do the garments that are running down the garment, the runway in real time.
I'm working on that.
You know, so that's or give a sense. How could they touch, feel the garment? You know, texture. What it, you know.
We were saying that it's a very interesting fabric in the show. You could give a swatch to everyone on the way in so they can actually touch fabric while they're watching the show or something, and then they turn it back in. You know, and give it to the next group that's coming in.
There's the innovation.
Right.
You get to touch it, feel it, and then it becomes memorable. You start, you know, it's like it sits with you. Like I go, you know, we go shopping with my wife, and she'll try on the back, you know, and she looks at herself in the mirror, and there's a point at which there's you know, you can become attached to the object, right? If you hold it long enough, you're like, well, I have to buy it. So there's a connection there with that as well. That if they really like what they're feeling, then they're gonna probably there's will be a higher conversion rate in terms of who's wearing those dresses, right? And that's some of what it's down to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, get an association, and then you have to.
Great. Well, guys, thank you very much. That was basically what we're going to be covering today. Thank you very much. What I was saying is take a good version of your your idea, your thought process, and post it, share it back with the team, so everybody else that didn't get to experience this gets an understanding of what you guys did this afternoon. Thank you very much for your
How do
time.
we do that?
You
On
can-
social media?
Yeah, yeah. So if there's a particular, like for example, if there's a particular example that you saw or chart that you captured that you wanted to take a picture of it, then you can say, here's what I was doing based on that in that particular sense. You don't. It doesn't have to be. There are other inspirational things besides Bach that may tie it back to sense that you guys were covering.
Right.
Sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of sight.
Yep.
And then you can say, here's an example of how using sense of sight we can take this and make it into this plus this equals that. Sort of give back to the community.
I noticed that more children's exhibits have much more activity to it, and I thought it's because they understand, like the Montessori way, all five senses. That I'm trying to take that, because I'm trained in Montessori, take that tactorial experience, no matter what it is, and then bring that into the entire sandbox and everyone, because that's when the magic happens. That's when the magic happens, and everyone's moved. That's when they're moved. That's what you want to create, is an emotional reaction to things that sticks with them in their mind. If it's like your wife, through the olfactory, or me through sound, it's like, oh, I remember that show. It had the great blank. What is that?
Yep.
And you ask 5 different senses, people have different sensorial preferences, and you'll get a different story from each one. And the music. I love the clothes. I love the seats were so comfortable. Oh shit! The seats were so comfortable.
I'll have to.
Yeah. That was the live stream fell off cliff. Excellent, excellent.
Did you have any? I didn't want to put you on the spot there. That you have something that continues on throughout the day. Could be an olfactory journey, sort of evolves throughout the day. In the morning, you put something on, you leave the house, not gonna work. They have these small jobs you take on one of the first, right? But if you had it there where it just automatically gives you a little spritz, and it just helps you, it makes your day. You feel better off of it.
You just gave me an idea. As people coming to show, what if you gave them, say like a show about deities or something, and you give them a cotton ball with patchouli, lavender, and lemon,
Right.
something that's an olfactory thing that brings into the namaste feeling. Right. And everyone has to, and the host Calvin says, take your scent. Everyone breathes in together and exhales. Breathes in, and you get everyone in that room thinking together and all breathe together. That might be a really cool thing. Right, and it's just a cotton ball. It's a cotton ball doused in, well, I had a fashion show that did, and the complaint that I got the designers was it was too busy, that their designs weren't featured because I had site time and all that. And I'm here, and I'm thinking, you know what? I know you think designs are really important, but isn't it like the experience I was telling you? So fun that the experience, the memorable aspect of the show, it has to touch things besides just that. But I'm thinking, then you should definitely have something even cooler that. Hey, Robin! Just even fast scrap, little like linen, a piece of pure doused linen, and it's sustainable. You don't have to have plastic or whatever. Right. But it's also the feeling, because there's such a, I'm sure his wife would attest to it, there's such a sensual memory it has that the room smelled that way. I didn't like that place because it smelled like that. People are really sensitive to smells. People are very, very happy. It's almost like a taste association.
Like every scent, like a heavy purple.
Happy, sense and sensibility. It can give you a headache. It can give you a headache. Because there's that brain barrier that, you know, there's molecules that you're actually breathing, and they go into your blood, and they affect your wellness, your well-being.
Yeah.
But I just have to think, I might even want to do that. I have a sustainable section, so I did 2 Native American designers, and they brought Native American fashions and their singers and the drummer, and so it was very, yeah,
Wow,
it was,
that's cool.
It was sustainable, and it was sustainable. I would go back to the earth, back to Mother Earth started the show, and everyone was, I mean, the outfits had those bell on them, you know, and clank, 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 clank. They were all traditional outfits.
I grew up in North Dakota, so there's a lot of native.
And they brought like movies that were like eagles and, you know, soaring off this 40-foot screen, and everyone was just so moved because I wanted people, what am I trying to do about this sustainability? Region Runway is about getting back to nature.
I think that in a lot of the storefronts around too,
Oh, sustainability is huge now. I really stepped in it. I know the first sustainable fashion show we went to Denver, and they really loved it. They loved it. They need to stay very planet.
Yeah.
Very planet.
I gave a talk for Sustainability Week. Whatever's coming up next week. There's one that's coming up.
Yeah.
Climate Week.
Yeah.
They have Solarium Week, which is in October, and then have Sustainability Week, which is week. It's like I can't keep track.
Oh, I know.
There's a different day.
April. Yeah.
April.
Yeah.
It's like there's.
Go ahead. Every day should be early, I said. One day, the earth is here.
Well, if I can help out in any way.
I know, you are fascinating. I'm so glad I saw you. Because I teach sustainability and these millennials. They're like birds, you know, like open mouths of birds. They don't want to harm and everyone's, it's minor now. LIM is minor in sustainability. And all these 20-year-olds, whatever, they're all into products that don't do any harm, and they're all Sustainable Development Goals, B Corp. They know all that stuff, and they're demanding it. They're demanding it from their. They want the blockchain to be exposed and the transient production to be exposed, and I bet they would absolutely love the. And because it gets down to the basics, everyone's layering on top of this artificiality and all this. But if you can get down to the basics, that's what we're hardwired for. So that's more experiential.
I don't know.
What's the next one?
It's not till 6.
Oh, it's mine? Oh, okay. I'm gonna go get ready.
Something carving and my back. Oh, okay.
Imagine it as a golden ball, bursting, so like people like bursting, you know? So, this uses a 6-axis for
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
and that means
online.
And I have not met you. Hi, nice to meet you. The wonderful. I forgot her name. She's been teaching us too. Hey. Thank you so much. Right here. That was very, very sweet. So I was just and all the way forwards down and comes up the legs, and then as you bring the center down into the dantian, and the legs out of there, right? And then as you like, you can fireballs out of your arms, like, the light is moving, it's really natural healers and everything always lasts. They connect top, bottom, and shirt. Are you working agency and project? That shit was amazingly terrible. But it was worth it. But this was wrong. So easy, LED, really like only because of that. Only because of that. The sad thing is that the good things, I don't know which one it is. The gentleman who made this, he's 3 times golden star. I can't believe I forgot. He died after making this his last life. Do you have a card? Yeah. What did you do? No, well, it was not electrocuted, but really was he was
Oh, this is my
old, very old gentleman.
It's amazing what you do with the different.
Maybe I was the bad one. I didn't bad in the bad one. It was plus, but it's like, right. And that's why runway the railway was great. I did launch at a hotel for 500 people. You should join it because it's fair trade, it's quality, it's fair trade, it's all about 17 sustainable goals and all that. It's just really
My kids, maybe you know. So, the ooh.